Have you ever come across these kind of statements before? Yeah, you can't. This is just when I'm getting my son ready for school every morning. But you hear this human rights card, and I call it the get out of jail free card of the 2010s. If you don't want to do PA, if you don't want to do, I don't want to do that, that's against my human rights. And I do a lot of public speaking, and one incident in particular sticks out in my mind when I was doing a conference in Birmingham, and I was talking about something similar. A lady put a hand up and she said, I disagree with what you're saying, that would breach the child's human rights. I said, well, interesting you say that. My next 3 slides are all about human rights. Which article of the Human Rights Act are you referring to? She said, well, what do you mean? So are you talking about right to life, restriction of liberty? Tell me and I'll explain it to you. And she said, I don't know anything about that nonsense. I'm just telling you it's against the child's human rights. Afterwards, when I chatted to her, I found out she was a social worker. So she's educated, good job, she's involved with policy and procedure, but she was doing what 99% of all other people do. She was coining a phrase. She's heard it somewhere and it sounds cool, so she's just throwing the human rights card out there. If nothing else, if you don't go away from here laughing at my jokes today, I want you to go away understanding the concept of human rights. So if anyone ever challenges you on it or asks you a question, you can do one of 2 things. You can silence them and get on with your job, or you can have an educated discussion where you make them understand how the Human Rights Act works. So we're going to play Have I Got Human Rights For You? Okay? I think we're all right on copyright. It's a little game I've put together which involves 4 cases from the media you may or may not remember. Okay? So, top left, lady wanted to wear a cross for work. Who did she work for? She worked for British Airways. Her name was Nadia Ivida. What was she told by BA? She's told you can't wear a cross. Can you imagine being a non-Christian and having to look at such an offensive structure as a cross on someone's neck? Can you imagine that? That's what BA said. Not going to give you the answers, I'm going to give you the cases, give you a formula, and then you'll all understand why they ended the way they did. Who does the hook represent? Abu Hamza, yeah, so a radical extremist who we wanted to deport to his country of origin, which was Egypt, but we couldn't. There were issues. Now, first issue was America wanted to have a word with him, which is always concerning. The second issue was that if he did get deported to America or Egypt, there was a fear he wouldn't get a fair trial because evidence that had been gathered against him had been gathered by doing what to people? Torture. Torture against the Human Rights Act. We signed on to the treaty, so it meant we couldn't deport him. The credit cards represent a convicted paedophile called Christopher Prothero. He was released from prison, he made a Freedom of Information request, and they found out that the police were monitoring his bank accounts, his internet search history and his phone records. They wanted to see exactly what he was doing, exactly what he was looking at. He said it was an infringement of his human rights and he took his case to the European Court to get compensation and to have it stopped. Are we feeling angry yet? Yeah. Just want to boil you up a bit. Last one represents a hitman called Gilbert Winter. Now Gilbert worked for the Clerkenwell Crime Syndicate. You may have heard the newspapers label them as the Addams Family. He did his time as a hitman, he came out of prison, and rival gangsters were talking in a pub about how they were going to kill him now he's been freed. Police surveillance officers were listening to those tapes, and the police obviously had an obligation to protect his life. So an application was put in to put 24-hour armed protection of Gilbert to stop the other hitmen from assassinating. Bit angry yet? Okay, good. So 3 types of human rights. We've got absolute, qualified. Does anyone know what the last one is? They're limited rights. So limited rights apply to governments in times of war. So for example, we're not big on slavery. We're passing another modern slavery bill soon. If there's a war tomorrow, what will happen to everybody in this room? Yeah, exactly. We'll be forced to do certain things to protect our country. So they'll keep that in mind. Absolute rights, they follow the Ron Seal rule, so they do exactly what they say on the tin. So the first one, the prohibition of torture. We all picked up on it when we talked about the Abu Hamza case. We don't torture people under any circumstances. So even if somebody comes forward and they've got information which would be in the interest of national security, we can't be seen to torture them at all. If you believe what you read in the Daily Mail, we fly them somewhere else, torture them for us and we fly them back. But I don't know if that's true. So the other one, the right to life. This means that no one can take your life away unless you've been sentenced to death by a court. Now, we don't have the death penalty, so how does that work? What's it unlawful to assist someone to do in this country? Assisted suicide, so that's how it works. The other thing it does is it places a positive obligation on the state to preserve life. So where there's a known risk to life, so for example, busy roads, we put speed cameras. Where there's a risk of fire, we put fire exits. So because we're a developed country that signed on to the treaty, you'll see all these safeguards in place. We call it health and safety red tape. And the last one is the right to hold a religious belief. That means you can believe in any religion you want to, and here's the cool bit, you can even make one up. And if 2 other people believe in it, it's a recognised religion. So since the last census, what have we now got a lot of people who claim their religion is? Any Jedi's present? No? No, excellent. I don't know what the sign is. So there are your 3. So why have you come to a conference at a police station? And why is there somebody talking to you about paedophiles, gangsters and terrorists? Let me explain why. The next time you hear somebody play that human rights card, or the next time a member of staff is accused of doing something inappropriate because they've broken up a fight, put their hands on someone or held someone to calm them down, ask yourself this: is the child dead? Has anyone been torturing them? Are you telling them they can't be a Christian or they can't be a Muslim? Because unless it fits into one of those 3 categories, they're not talking about absolute rights. What they're accusing you of doing is taking away a qualified right, which you're perfectly entitled to do if you're protecting an absolute right. So just a quick consensus in here. Would anybody put their hands on a child forcibly unless the child was trying to harm themselves, harm someone else, or damage something? Not realistic. You're not going to. Well, that fits into there. You know, torture is abuse, harm, and risk to life would be something like going onto a busy main road. So let's talk about some of these. Child's right to education and play. We want every child to be in the classroom. We want every child to go out at break time. But if they're in a classroom and they're acting indecently, exposing themselves or using inappropriate sexual language, that fits into torture. So they get taken out of the class. We've got powers to do that. Playtime. Primary school, let's get all the kids out. It's fine, they can go on the playground. If you've got a child who keeps scaling the fence and running onto the busy main road, should we expose them to that risk? No, until we've got the necessary measures in, either bigger fences or appropriate supervision, then you can take that away from them. But I see so many organisations that are terrified. Oh, we have to leave the doors unlocked. You have to do what? We have to leave the doors unlocked. It's imprisonment. Well, realistically, right to liberty has only ever been a qualified right. So you can take away someone's liberty to protect them. Think about it. In a nursery, they don't leave the doors open, do they? In a care home, for example, somebody who lacks capacity, they'll keep an eye on them. They'll maybe take away walking aids so they can't wander off outside. I did some consultancy for a company in Lancashire who were told by the local authority that they had to cut the belts off any wheelchairs they used. So when I asked them why, they said, oh, because it's a restriction of liberty. Well, then when I pointed out to them, if they hit a bump, they're going to launch the person, they had to sort of go back. But people put these strange rules in to protect people, but it's got the opposite effect very often. And the last one I want to talk about, there's lots of other qualified ones, you can look this up yourselves. The right to manifest your religious belief. Now this is a contentious one. So let me give you 2 global examples. So religious belief, it sits inside your head, it can't offend anybody. The moment you let it manifest itself, it's only ever qualified. So the Abu Dhabi national women's football team, you may not have heard of them, they only started playing professional matches last September. That's because the ladies on the team said, we'll play, but we want to wear our abaya, which is the head robe which leaves the face open and wraps around the neck. And the FA said, we don't have a problem with your religious belief, but you're expressing it and putting people's lives at risk. Someone could pull it, it could choke you, so you're not playing. Now, it was only when the Prince of Abu Dhabi introduced a Velcro attachment that they're now allowed to play. Boxers, have you ever seen a professional boxer with a beard? If you have, they're very close to the face, so you can see any cuts. So any blood-borne viruses won't be spread. They can cover them, they can make sure people are protected. So some people will say, I grow a beard to express my religion. That's absolutely fine. But the moment you want to step into the professional boxing arena, you'll be handed the clippers. And if you refuse, you won't enter into the competition. So on a global level, it's ruled with an iron fist. But on a local level, people are terrified of human rights. They don't understand it. They'd rather protect someone's beliefs or expression of religion than stopping them from injuring people or putting lives at risk. So the 4 cases, let's talk about how they ended. Nadia Uvida, she was told by the Supreme Court, the highest court in England, you can't wear your cross. She went to Europe, and the European judge, does anyone know what the judge told her? You can wear it, and if anyone's offended by it, tell them not to look at it. Does that make perfect sense? Of course it makes sense. 2 other cases failed. One was a nurse, one was someone who worked in a factory. Why did they fail? Right to life. It was the fact that it was an item of jewellery, not about the message that it was sending. Abu Hamza, now you'll have seen this in the media, there was obviously massive controversy, we had real problems to deport him. Those of you that aren't aware, he's now serving life, and I think life is more likely to mean life in America because we deported him there, and he stood trial there first. So we had these issues that torture was going to be used. How did we get round it? This is how we got round it. We got a letter from the King of Egypt, and we got a letter from the US State Department which said that he would get a fair trial. So I'm sure he'll be fine. Christopher Prothero, he went to Europe as well to fight his right to privacy because he didn't want people looking at what he was seeing on the internet, and he didn't want people seeing what he was spending his money on. I can see some of you getting really angry just me talking about this. Christopher was told that the police will continue to monitor him until he proves to us that he's not a danger. Does that make sense? Every 15 years. So he's on it for 15 years, then they'll check to see if he's a danger. Because realistically, torture, right to life, they're absolute rights. Right to privacy goes out the window in those circumstances. Gilbert Winter, who's now been assassinated, which is irony for you, he received £120,000 of taxpayers' money to provide armed protection of him in 1 month. The protection only stopped when he made a request that the officers left him alone. Think about it. If you're a hitman and the police are following you, 1, it's going to ruin your street cred, and 2, you're not going to get much work done, are you really?